The Riverside Hall in Chicago glittered like a jewel box under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The air was heavy with the scent of truffles, aged wine, and the kind of perfume that cost more than most people's rent. David Crowe, a 38-year-old architect with a sharp jawline and eyes that missed nothing, sat at the head of a long oak table. It was his birthday, a lavish affair orchestrated by his wife, Emily, a 35-year-old influencer whose smile was as curated as her Instagram feed. The room buzzed with Chicago's elite, real estate moguls, tech entrepreneurs, and local celebrities, all raising glasses in his honor. But David felt a prickle at the back of his neck. Something was off. The smiles around him were too tight, too polished, like masks at a masquerade. Emily, radiant in a champagne-colored gown that shimmered with every move, laughed a little too loudly at a joke from David's older brother, Nathan. At 40, Nathan was the golden son of Crowe Industries, their family's real estate empire. His tailored suit and easy grin screamed privilege, and he leaned closer to Emily than David liked, whispering something that made her giggle and touch his arm. Across the table, their father, Henry, a silver-haired titan with a bourbon in hand, surveyed the room like a king inspecting his court. Ruth, Nathan's mother and Henry's second wife, glittered in emeralds, her gaze darting between Emily and Nathan with a knowing smirk. The rest of the guests, board members, socialites, and hangers-on, filled the space with clinking glasses and calculated small talk. As the dessert plates were cleared and a pianist in the corner shifted to a slow jazz melody, the room's attention turned to David. Tradition demanded a speech from the birthday boy, something grateful, charming, a toast to cap the night. He stood, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal suit, and cleared his throat. But before he could speak, Emily rose, her movements quick and deliberate. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with something David couldn't quite place: excitement or maybe defiance. "Everyone," she said, her voice clear and honeyed, cutting through the chatter. "Before David gives his toast, I have something to share." A ripple of amusement passed through the guests. Emily was known for stealing the spotlight, and no one seemed surprised. She raised her champagne flute, her other hand resting lightly on her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she announced, pausing for effect. The room erupted in polite applause, a few gasps of delight. Then she turned to Nathan, her smile widening. "And the father is Nathan." The air froze. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. A fork clattered against the plate. Henry's bourbon stopped halfway to his mouth, his face a mask of stone. Ruth's emerald seemed to gleam brighter, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Nathan stared at his plate, his knuckles white around his napkin, as if the tablecloth might swallow him whole. The pianist missed a note, the melody stuttering in his silence. Every eye in the room darted between Emily, Nathan, and David, waiting for the explosion. But David didn't explode. He didn't shout or storm out. Instead, he raised his glass slowly, his movements deliberate, and smiled, a calm, razor-sharp smile that made the room feel smaller. "That's fascinating," he said, his voice steady, just loud enough to carry. "Especially since the fertility clinic confirmed last month that Emily is medically incapable of conceiving." The silence cracked like ice. Someone, probably a board member's wife in a sequin dress, gasped audibly. Emily's hand dropped from her stomach, her face draining of color. Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion. Henry's bourbon hit the table with a thud. Ruth's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. David reached into the inner pocket of his suit and pulled out a folded piece of paper, holding it up like a flag. "I have the paperwork," he said, his gaze locking onto Emily, then Nathan, and finally Henry. Brighton Fertility Clinic. 2 visits. Primary infertility. No chance of natural conception. Would anyone like to see? Emily's lips moved, but no sound came out. "David, what?" she stammered, her voice trembling. Nathan stood, his chair scraping loudly. "David, let's talk privately," he said, his tone urgent, almost pleading. But David cut him off, his voice still calm, but slicing like a blade. "Why? You made it public." "She made it public. Let's keep it public." Henry slammed his glass down, the crack echoing like a gunshot. "Enough," he barked, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't the place." David turned to him, unblinking. "Oh, I think it's exactly the place. Emily wanted an audience. Let's give her one." Emily's eyes darted around the room, desperate, like a cornered animal. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected tears, rage, maybe a dramatic exit. Not this. David, standing tall, unshaken, with the truth as his weapon. Ruth opened her mouth to speak, but Henry raised a hand, silencing her. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their whispers growing into a low hum. David set the paper on the table, smoothing it out deliberately. "You did all the work, Emily," he said. "I just followed the trail." He finished his champagne in one slow sip, placed the glass down, and buttoned his jacket. "I believe that concludes the toast," he said, nodding to the room. Then he turned and walked out, his steps measured, his back straight. Behind him, the whispers swelled into chaos. Chairs scraping, voices rising, someone calling his name. The pianist started playing again, a frantic attempt to restore order, but it was too late. The night had shattered, and David had lit the fuse. As he stepped into the cool Chicago night, the city skyline loomed before him, all glass and steel, a world he'd helped shape. He didn't look back at Riverside Hall. He didn't need to. The truth was out, and it was louder than any lie Emily could spin. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. Probably Henry, or maybe Nathan, scrambling to contain the fallout. David ignored it. He had known this moment was coming, and he was ready for what came next. 2 months before the explosive night at Riverside Hall, David Crowe sat in the dim glow of his Chicago penthouse, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop through floor-to-ceiling windows. It was past midnight, and his architecture firm had just secured a contract for a sleek, eco-friendly skyscraper, a career-defining win. He should have been celebrating, but instead, he felt a gnawing unease, like a splinter he couldn't quite locate. His wife, Emily, had gone to bed hours earlier, claiming exhaustion from a brand meeting. Her phone, usually an extension of her hand, lay face down on the nightstand in their bedroom. That alone was strange. Emily, the influencer with 500,000 followers, never let her phone out of sight. Not during dinner, not during their rare, quiet moments, not even in the shower. David wasn't the type to snoop. He'd built his life on trust, on clean lines and honest designs, both in his work and his marriage. But tonight, his instincts hummed like a warning signal. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the phone. The penthouse was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. He picked it up, expecting a flurry of notifications, texts from her PR team, Instagram alerts, maybe a meme from her assistant. Instead, the screen was blank. No messages, no calls, no emails. Nothing. For someone whose life was a constant performance, the silence was deafening. He swiped to unlock it. Emily had shared her passcode early in their marriage, a gesture of transparency he'd never used until now. The home screen looked normal at first. Fitness apps, social media, her calendar. But tucked between a meditation app and her banking icon was something new. Pulse track. David frowned. Emily wasn't a fitness buff. Her workouts were more for Instagram than health. He tapped the icon, expecting a step counter or calorie tracker. Instead, a chat interface loaded, disguised as a workout log. His stomach tightened as he scrolled through a thread labeled in. The latest message, sent at 11:43 p.m., read, "He won't suspect a thing. Just keep it quiet until the board meeting." It was from Emily to Nathan, his older brother. David's pulse quickened. He scrolled up, each message a shard of glass. "Once we have the air, Henry will sign off. David's too busy with his sketches to notice. We need to lock this down before the vote." The words blurred together, but one phrase burned into his mind. He's out of the game. They were talking about him, past tense, like he was already gone. David sat on the edge of the bed, the phone heavy in his hand. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. This wasn't just an affair. It was a plan, a calculated move to erase him from his own life. Emily and Nathan weren't just betraying him. They were rewriting his future. But he didn't storm into the bedroom to confront her. He didn't smash the phone or call Nathan to curse him out. Instead, he took a breath, snapped photos of the chat, and placed the phone back exactly as he'd found it. Anger could wait. He wanted answers first. The next morning, Emily was all smiles, brewing coffee in their minimalist kitchen, her hair swept into a perfect bun. "Big day," she asked, sliding a mug toward him. David nodded, his face neutral. "Just the usual." "You," she shrugged, mentioning a photo shoot, her voice light and practiced. He watched her closely, noting the way her eyes avoided his, the way her fingers lingered on her phone before slipping it into her pocket. She had no idea he'd seen the edge of her secret. By noon, David was in his office, a sleek space filled with blueprints and mood boards. He called Mike, a college friend turned private investigator, whose gruff voice always carried a hint of mischief. "I need a favor," David said, keeping his tone even. "Emily and Nathan. I need to know what they're up to. Everything." Mike whistled low. "Family drama, huh? This could get messy." David leaned back in his chair, staring at a model of his skyscraper. "It's already messy. I just need the map." Over the next week, Mike worked fast. He tailed Emily, hacked in her cloud backups, and cross-referenced Nathan's financials with Crowe Industries records. The first report arrived in a plain manila envelope, delivered to David's office after hours. He opened it alone, the city's lights flickering beyond his window. Bank transfer from Nathan to Emily. $2,000, $5,000, $12,000. Over 6 months, labeled as consulting fees. Photos of them together. A discreet lunch at a rooftop bar, a late-night exit from the Starlight Hotel. Emily slipping out first, Nathan following 5 minutes later. GPS logs from Emily's car showed trips to a clinic called Horizon Fertility. Always under the radar, always alone. But the real gut punch was a single email, intercepted from Emily's encrypted account. It was to Ruth, Nathan's mother, sent 3 weeks ago. "The clinic confirmed it's a no-go naturally, but we can use a donor. Nathan's on board. Henry will eat it up. A grandchild to secure the legacy. David won't see it coming." David's hands shook as he read it again. A donor, a fake pregnancy, a plot to manipulate his father, Henry, the patriarch who valued lineage above all else. They weren't just cheating, they were staging a coup, with David as the collateral damage. He drove to Horizon Fertility the next day, his jaw set, his mind racing. The clinic was a sleek, glass-fronted building in a quiet corner of the city. He walked in, exuding the confidence of a man who belonged, and gave the receptionist a practiced smile. "I'm here about my wife's records," he said, using Emily's alias, Clara Wood, which Mike had uncovered. "There's been a mix-up with our insurance." The receptionist hesitated, then typed into her computer. "Clara Wood," she confirmed, her voice low. "Fertility evaluations, blood work, hormone panels. Final diagnosis, primary infertility. No chance of natural conception." David nodded, his face impassive, but inside his chest burned. "Any mention of a partner?" he asked. She shook her head. "None listed." He left with a copy of the report, his mind spinning. Emily hadn't just lied about their future together. She'd built a facade so elaborate it could fool everyone, except him. Back in his car, he stared at the skyline, the city he'd helped shape. He wasn't the naive husband they thought he was. He was an architect, a man who saw patterns, who built things to last. And now, he'd build something else, a plan to expose them, piece by careful piece. Emily and Nathan thought they held all the cards. They didn't know David was already rewriting the blueprint. David Crowe sat in his Chicago office, the city's skyline a jagged silhouette against the dusk. The manila envelope from Mike, his private investigator friend, lay open on his desk, its contents spilling out like a map to a war he hadn't known he was fighting. Bank transfers, photos, and intercepted emails painted a grim picture. His wife, Emily, and his brother, Nathan, weren't just entangled in an affair. They were orchestrating a takeover, using a fabricated pregnancy to manipulate their father, Henry, and seize control of Crowe Industries. But the deeper David dug, the more he realized this wasn't a crime of passion. It was a conspiracy with roots that stretched further than he'd imagined. Mike's latest report, delivered that morning, added a new layer. David flipped through it, his jaw tightening. A series of encrypted messages between Emily and Ruth, Nathan's mother, revealed their endgame. "The board vote is in 3 months," Emily wrote. "A grandchild will lock Henry's loyalty. Nathan will be untouchable, and David will be out." Ruth's reply was colder. "Make it convincing. Henry's soft on legacy, but he's not stupid. David's too quiet to fight back." David's fingers curled into a fist. Quiet, they called him. They'd mistaken his restraint for weakness, his thoughtfulness for surrender. The report also flagged a name, Horizon Fertility. Emily's visits, under the alias Clara Wood, weren't just for tests. She'd inquired about donor embryos, a process she kept hidden from everyone, including Nathan. The clinic's notes, obtained by Mike through a discreet contact, mentioned third-party arrangements and confidential procurement. David leaned back, piecing it together. Emily wasn't pregnant. She couldn't be. But she planned to fake it, using a donor embryo to pass off a child as Nathan's. The audacity of it stunned him. She wasn't just betraying him. She was building a lie to rewrite the family's future. David needed more. He called Mike, his voice low but firm. Dig into Ruth. She's not just cheering from the sidelines. Find out how deep she's in. Mike chuckled grimly. You're playing with fire, man. Ruth's got claws. David didn't flinch. So do I. I just don't show them. While Mike worked, David reached out to an old college friend, Sarah, a forensic accountant who owed him a favor. I need you to trace Nathan's financials. He told her over coffee at a quiet cafe near the Loop. Anything that smells like it's hiding something. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Family secrets, huh? Give me a week. Sarah delivered in 5 days. Her findings, emailed in a password-protected file, were a bombshell. Nathan had siphoned $1.7 million from Crowe Industries over the past year, funneling it through shell companies disguised as consulting services. Some of the money went to Emily, luxury purchases, spa retreats, and payments to Horizon Fertility. But a chunk had gone to Ruth, deposited into an offshore account labeled Legacy Trust. David stared at the numbers, his mind racing. Ruth wasn't just complicit. She was bankrolling the scheme, using Nathan's embezzlement to fund her vision of a Crowe dynasty with Nathan at the helm and David erased. He drove to a park overlooking Lake Michigan, needing air to think. The water stretched out, calm and endless, a stark contrast to the storm in his chest. Ruth had always favored Nathan, her biological son, over David, Henry's child from his first marriage. She'd never hidden her disdain for David's artsy career, his refusal to chase corporate power. But this was surgical. She'd weaponized Emily's ambition, Nathan's greed, and Henry's obsession with legacy to cut David out entirely. The child, real or not, was their trump card, a way to cement Nathan's place and marginalize David before the board's next vote. David's next move was risky but necessary. He booked a meeting with a nurse at Horizon Fertility, posing as a concerned family member. Armed with Clara Wood's alias and a vague story about insurance disputes, he charmed his way into a conversation. The nurse, after some hesitation, confirmed Emily's visits. She was adamant about privacy, the nurse said, glancing at her screen. Requested donor profiles, specific traits like dark hair, Ivy League education. Said it was for a family project. David nodded, his face a mask of calm. Any paperwork signed by a partner? The nurse shook her head. She handled everything alone. Back in his car, David clutched the steering wheel, the pieces clicking into place. Emily had selected a donor to mimic Nathan's profile, ensuring the child would pass as his. She'd forged documents, likely including David's signature, to access marital insurance for the treatments. Nathan, arrogant and distracted, probably didn't even know the child wasn't his. And Ruth, she was the puppet master, pulling strings from the shadows, betting on Henry's sentimentality to overlook the cracks. David's phone buzzed, a text from Mike. Found something big. Meet me tonight. At a dive bar near Wicker Park. Mike slid a USB drive across the table. Ruth's been meeting with a lawyer, he said, nursing a beer. Not just any lawyer, someone who specializes in corporate trusts. She's drafting documents to redirect Henry's shares to a trust for future heirs. Guess who's named as trustee? Nathan. David's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a fake pregnancy. It was a hostile takeover of Crowe Industries, with David's inheritance as the first casualty. He plugged the USB into his laptop, scanning the files. Emails between Ruth and the lawyer mentioned securing the bloodline and neutralizing obstacles. One line, buried in a draft, made his breath catch. David's stay can be diluted post-announcement. The board won't question a new heir. They plan to announce the pregnancy at David's birthday, leveraging the public spectacle to pressure Henry into rewriting his will. David closed the laptop, his mind clear. They thought he'd crumble under the betrayal. They were wrong. He called Sarah again. I need everything you have on those shell companies. Timelines, transactions, names. Then he texted Mike. Keep eyes on Emily. She's planning something for my birthday. I want to know what. David wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. He was building a fortress. Emily, Nathan, and Ruth thought they'd outmaneuvered him. But David was an architect, and he knew how to design a collapse. The birthday dinner would be their stage, but it would be his victory. David Crowe stood in his Chicago office, the city's skyline a constellation of ambition beyond the glass. The evidence he'd gathered, bank transfers, intercepted emails, clinic records, lay spread across his desk like a battle map. Emily, his wife, and Nathan, his brother, weren't just betraying him with an affair. They were orchestrating a coup to seize Crowe Industries, using a fake pregnancy to manipulate their father, Henry. Ruth, Nathan's mother, was the mastermind, pulling strings to secure a legacy that excluded David. The birthday dinner at Riverside Hall, now a week away, was their planned stage to unveil the heir. But David wasn't going to let them steal the spotlight. He was crafting a counterstrike, one built on truth and precision. David had enlisted Laura Wilson, a sharp corporate lawyer with a reputation for dismantling lies. Over coffee in a discreet Loop cafe, he handed her a thick folder. "This is everything," he said. "Nathan's embezzlement, Emily's forged documents, Ruth's trust scheme. I need it airtight for the board." Laura skimmed the pages, her eyes narrowing. "This is a house of cards, David. One push and it collapses. But you need to time it right." David nodded. "The dinner. That's when they'll make their move. I want to be ready." Laura's team dug deeper into Nathan's financials, uncovering $4.8 million funneled through shell companies to offshore accounts. Some funded Emily's lifestyle, designer bags, private jets, but a significant portion went to Horizon Fertility, where Emily, under the alias Clara Wood, had arranged donor embryos to fake a pregnancy. Ruth's offshore legacy trust received regular deposits tied to Nathan's theft. Laura also found a forged insurance document with David's signature, used to cover Emily's clinic visits. "This is fraud," Laura said, tapping the paper. "We can bury her with this." David's private investigator, Mike, kept tabs on Emily's movements. "She's planning something big for your birthday," Mike reported over a late-night call. Booked Riverside Hall, invited the board, influencers, even a photographer. "It's a show." David's jaw tightened. Emily thought she'd choreograph his humiliation, announcing a child that wasn't hers, pinning it on Nathan to win Henry's favor. She didn't know David had the script, and he was rewriting the ending. He met Sarah, his forensic accountant friend, at a diner near Lake Michigan. She slid a USB drive across the table. "Nathan's shell companies are sloppy," she said. "I traced every transaction, dates, amounts, even the Cayman's bank. He's been skimming for 14 months. Ruth's trust is the end game, but there's more. Emily's been wiring money to a third party, someone not on your radar." David frowned. "Who?" Sarah shrugged. "No name yet, but the payments match Horizon's donor program. She's covering tracks." The new lead sent David back to Horizon Fertility. Posing as a consultant for a family trust, he met a senior administrator, using Clara Wood's alias to probe deeper. The patient was meticulous, the administrator admitted, checking records. Selected a donor with specific traits: dark hair, high IQ, no genetic risks. Paid cash, no partner listed. David's pulse quickened. Emily had crafted a lie so convincing even Nathan believed it. But the donor wasn't Nathan's match. It was a stranger's, chosen to pass as his. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a performance. David's plan took shape. He instructed Laura to prepare a dossier for the Crowe Industries board, detailing Nathan's embezzlement, Emily's fraud, and Ruth's trust scheme. "Don't send it yet," he told her. "I'll signal at the dinner." He also contacted Riverside Hall, adjusting the evening schedule. "Move the toast to after dessert," he told the manager. "The birthday boy has an announcement." The manager, sensing drama, agreed without question. Days before the dinner, David met Mike one last time. "Emily's nervous," Mike said, showing photos of her at a cafe, glancing over her shoulder. "She's meeting Ruth tomorrow, probably finalizing the announcement." David studied the images, noting Emily's tense posture, Ruth's smug grin. "Let them think they've won," he said. "It'll make the fall harder." Mike grinned. "You're scary when you're focused, man." The night of the dinner arrived. Riverside Hall shimmered with gold and cream decor, the air thick with wealth and whispers. David wore a charcoal suit, his expression calm, but his mind a steel trap. Emily, in a champagne gown, played the perfect hostess, her smile a mask of triumph. Nathan, in a navy blazer, exuded his usual arrogance, winking at Emily as he passed David. Henry sat at the table's center, bourbon in hand, oblivious to the storm brewing. Ruth, draped in emeralds, watched Emily like a proud director. The guests, board members, influencers, Chicago's elite, filled the room with clinking glasses and forced laughter. Dinner passed in a blur. David barely ate, his eyes tracking Emily's every move, Nathan's casual touches, Ruth's knowing glances. As dessert plates were cleared, the pianist slowed to a jazzy ballad, and the room's focus shifted to David. He stood, ready to speak, but Emily beat him to it, rising with a flourish. "Everyone," she said, her voice syrupy, "I have news." She placed a hand on her stomach, her eyes gleaming. "I'm pregnant, and the father is Nathan." The room froze. A glass shattered. Henry's face went rigid. Nathan's smirk faltered. Ruth's lips parted in a silent cheer. David waited, letting the shock settle, then raised his glass. "Fascinating," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Especially since Horizon Fertility confirmed Emily can't conceive." Gasps erupted. Emily's hand dropped, her face paling. David pulled a folded report from his jacket. "Primary infertility. No natural pregnancy possible. I have copies if anyone's curious." Nathan lurched to his feet. "David, let's talk privately." David's gaze was ice. "You made it public. Let's keep it that way." He passed the report to Henry, who opened it, his expression darkening. Emily stammered, "David, you..." "How?" David cut her off. "You did the work, Emily. I just followed the trail." He set his glass down, buttoned his jacket, and walked out, leaving chaos in his wake. Whispers, shouts, the pianist's frantic notes. The dossier, sent to the board as he left, would finish what he'd started. Emily, Nathan, and Ruth thought they'd build a perfect lie. David's truth was sharper, and was only the beginning. David Crowe stood on the balcony of his new apartment, the Chicago skyline stretching before him like a canvas of glass and steel. The morning sun cast golden streaks across the harbor, and a cool breeze carried the scent of water and possibility. The apartment was sparse, concrete floors, a single chair, a bed still in its delivery box. But it was his. No trace of Emily's curated decor, no echoes of the life he'd left behind. For the first time in years, David felt a quiet hum in his chest. Peace. Not because the storm was over, but because he'd walked through it and come out whole. The fallout from his birthday dinner at Riverside Hall had been swift and merciless. The dossier David sent to the Crowe Industries board, detailing Nathan's $4.8 million embezzlement, Emily's forged fertility documents, and Ruth's secret trust, landed like a grenade. By morning, the board had suspended Nathan pending a full audit. His offshore accounts were frozen, and whispers of an FBI investigation began to circulate. Nathan, once the golden son, vanished from Chicago's elite circles, his name scrubbed from the company's website. Ruth, humiliated by her exposed role, fled to a condo in Florida, her influence shattered. Emily's fall was even steeper. Her Instagram, once a shrine to her 500,000 followers, became a battleground. Screenshots of her pregnancy announcement clashed with David's revelation, sparking a firestorm. Influencer blogs dissected her lies, and sponsors, luxury brands, wellness companies, dropped her overnight. Her account went dark, her curated empire reduced to memes about faking it. She tried emailing David, her subject lines desperate. "Please talk, it's not what you think." He deleted them without reading. Silence, his lawyer Laura had said, was the strongest verdict. David's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, but he let it ring. It was probably Henry, his father, who'd called twice since the dinner, his voice heavy with regret. "I was wrong about you," Henry had said in their last conversation. "The board wants you to step in, stabilize things." David hadn't answered then, and he wasn't ready now. Crowe Industries, with its marble halls and backroom deals, had never been his world. He'd built his own, through architecture, through honesty, through a life that didn't bend to anyone's script. The dinner's aftermath wasn't just about consequences, it was about clarity. David had hired Laura to document Emily's fraud, forged insurance forms, falsified donor agreements, ensuring a legal record existed. "You could press charges," Laura told him, sliding a contract across her desk. David shook his head. "I don't need her in court. I need her to live with the truth." Laura nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "You're not pulling punches anymore, are you?" David met her gaze. "I'm pulling curtains." The board, shaken by Nathan's betrayal, demanded answers. Laura's dossier, backed by Sarah's forensic accounting, left no room for doubt. Nathan had funneled millions into shell companies, some funding Emily's schemes, others lining Ruth's trust. A board meeting, held without Nathan, ended with a vote to strip him of voting power and launch an external investigation. David didn't attend. He didn't need to. The dominoes were falling, each one nudged by the truth he'd set free. He'd also secured a settlement with the family. Emily received nothing. No alimony, no stake in their joint assets. David insisted on two conditions: $100,000 donated to infertility research and $200,000 to a nonprofit supporting men facing false paternity claims. Laura announced it publicly, framing it as David's commitment to turning pain into purpose. The response was overwhelming. Emails flooded his inbox, men sharing stories of betrayal, thanking him for speaking out. David answered as many as he could, not because he wanted praise, but because he knew the weight of silence. He'd carried it too long. His new apartment, in an industrial loft near the West Loop, was a blank slate. The second bedroom became his studio, filled with sketches and models. Not for clients, but for himself. His latest project, a community center with green roofs and open spaces, had drawn interest from local developers. "It's bold," one said, studying the plans. "It's you." David smiled. For the first time, his work felt like an extension of his voice, not a compromise. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. He opened it to find Claire, a family friend who'd known his mother before she passed. She held a bottle of wine and a grin. "Thought I'd check on Chicago's favorite truth-teller," she said, brushing past him. "This place is empty." David laughed. "It's honest." Claire wandered to the balcony, peering at the skyline. "You look lighter, David, like you're not hiding anymore." He joined her, leaning on the railing. "I'm not. Turns out, truth leaves less to carry." She mentioned a gallery opening downtown, hosted by a friend. "They're showing local artists. Your sketches would fit right in. Plus, there's a curator who's curious about you. Anna, sharp, loves a good story." David raised an eyebrow. "I'm not looking for anything." Claire smirked. "Didn't say you were. Just show up. Let people see you." After she left, David sat at his table, flipping through his sketchbook. Half the pages were blank, but that didn't scare him. Blank was potential, a space to build something real. His phone buzzed again. Another email from Emily, a new address. He blocked it without opening. Nathan hadn't reached out, his silence louder than any apology. Henry's offer to join the company lingered, but David wasn't ready to decide. He didn't want power for power's sake. If he stepped in, it would be to build something honest from the ruins. He walked back to the balcony, coffee in hand, the city waking below. The Crowe Industries tower, once a symbol of exclusion, looked smaller now. Not because it had changed, but because he had. Emily's voice echoed from early in their marriage. A quiet moment when she'd whispered, "They'll never see you coming." She'd meant it as love. She was right, but not how she thought. They hadn't seen him coming because they'd underestimated him, assumed he'd break. But David hadn't broken. He'd rebuilt, higher, stronger, on his own terms. The sun climbed, painting the skyline gold. David raised his mug to the empty air. "To truth," he said softly. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was clean, full of beginnings. Emily, Nathan, and Ruth had tried to erase him, but they'd only cleared his path. This view, this life was his, and it was just the start.